Hi everyone, welcome to Travels with an Archaeologist. I'm the Archaeologist, and now let's get into the travels. Okay, so sorry about that. We're actually not going to have any travels today. Yeah, this is Travels with an Archaeologist. And normally there will be travels, places like Greece and Jordan and Italy and a lot of others. And next episode, Tunisia, just not today. No, today this is just an introductory video, so I thought I'd take this opportunity to introduce myself, my channel, what I'm gonna do, and why you should be following me. Now, there are a lot of benefits to world travel, not least of which it's just fun. But there's a lot of things you can learn while you're abroad, and this includes the world's history. And there's an awful lot of history to cover, and having an appreciation of it can often lead to a much deeper appreciation of the country and a much richer experience. Or at least, that's my belief. And if you too are a fellow history and traveling enthusiast, I encourage you to follow me along some of my past adventures around the world and some of my future ones where I actually knew I'd be making a YouTube video so I can get much better clips out of it. But, like I said, I don't really want to talk about that today. Today it is just an introductory video, and I do want to talk about some of the myths and misconceptions surrounding archaeology. Now, with that in mind, let's get right into some of the myths surrounding archaeology, starting with this one. Myth number one, we dig up dinosaurs. Now, if there are any paleontologists watching, please let me know in the comments, do you ever get asked if you raid tombs? Because, no, we don't dig up dinosaurs. I'd be lying if I didn't say I didn't want to be a paleontologist when I was younger, but we're not the same thing, though we do share a lot of similarities. This chart shows just how many similarities there are. And it's not like we don't collaborate either. This photo shows a couple of paleontologists helping us out at a dig in Alberta. Okay, myth two. Nope. Nope, 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 nope. What? I'm not running the History Channel here. Myth three. Archaeology is done only by old white men. Now, as a white guy myself, I may not be the best person to talk about this, and it certainly did used to be the case. However, as the decades went on, things began to diversify. More and more women began entering the field. More and more races began entering the field until eventually it got to a point where about 70 to 90% of archaeologists are women. It's true. I was outnumbered 10 to 1 in both my academic and professional careers. Okay, myth number four, tomb robbing. Now, this should go without saying, but we really don't rob tombs anymore. Sure, sometimes we get this big, impressive stuff. More often than not, we spend our time gathering dirt, sifting through the dirt in these machines, and then sifting through it again for tiny finds once it's completed. And when we do find things, it tends to be things like ditches, tree bowls in bad conditions, and these little pots, which we then have to label. Oh, there are graves sometimes. That doesn't really make my point, does it? Myth number five, we can't get dates. All right, guys, this one is just patently absurd. I mean, we've got carbon-14, dendrochronology, potassium argon. What? What? Oh, you mean like little... Oh, not that kind either. Not like the little date things and... No? Oh. All right, not a myth. Moving on. Myth 6. Archaeology is a colonial science. Now, like the gender and race connotation, this did used to be true. A lot of scientific fields have a problematic colonial past, archaeology especially. But as with these other scientific fields, today it's largely not a colonial endeavor. We actively work and engage with locals. We always take into account their local laws and customs. And even in these controversial or sensitive sites and materials, most present-day archaeology is attempting to be politically neutral and culturally respectful. Controversies that still do exist tend to be holdovers from the colonial era, or else media slants, which are unfortunately all too common. Now, obviously many archaeologists still do travel abroad, but this doesn't make it a colonial endeavor any more than you are a colonist when you go as a tourist to a site. Because you have to be politically neutral, and sometimes that's hard to do as a local. It's a good idea to have foreigners there to give you an objective opinion, an objective viewpoint. I mean, can you imagine with China being honest on Uyghur sites? Can you imagine Russia being honest on Ukrainian sites? And even in the best intentioned countries, with the best intentioned archaeologists, there's always going to be a feeling of local pride or identity or some core that may be challenged in an archaeology site. Ask yourself, if you're American, are you going to be politically neutral on a Civil War site? If you're a Native American, are you not going to have a feeling on fur trading sites? If you're a Greek, are you not going to have an issue with the Turkish sites? If you're an Arab, are you going to have an objective eye on Crusader sites? Ask yourself that with your own culture. There's bound to be something controversial in your culture, and it's okay to say no, you wouldn't. These are the questions archaeologists have to ask ourselves and the people that we work with. So, foreigners can often ask the questions that locals either can't or won't or feel uncomfortable with. That being said, it's also dumb to have nothing but foreigners on a site. That is a colonial endeavor. Uh, Locals obviously have the local knowledge. They can put themselves into the past of the people, the past of the environment. They have an idea what some of these things looked like. They have an idea of some of their rituals, and they will provide a valuable perspective to archaeologists who have no idea whatever they're looking at otherwise. And obviously, we do want to work with the local community. We want them to feel involved. We want them to know their own history as much as they want to know their own history. And we both want to know it correctly. Myth 7. I said I didn't want to discuss these. I'm going to have to, aren't I? All right, fine. But this is the last myth we're doing. Okay. I don't know why archaeology is subjected to so much pseudoscience and conspiracy. Every field has some kind of nut job they don't want the public listening to, but archaeology seems to have 10 for every one another field has. So let's get the air clear right now. We are too busy arguing about the truth to come up with a lie to tell the public. And at the end of the day, we are a scientific field. We come up with evidence-based theories, we follow the scientific method, we keep the records, and we encourage debate. We bridge the sciences, both hard sciences and social sciences, because to be an archaeologist, you not only have to know a bit of chemistry, a bit of geology, a bit of biology, you also have to know a bit of history, a bit of mythology, and a bit of anthropology. And we study, at the end of the day, human impact on the environment and environment impact on human society, how we've adapted and changed to one another, or how, more often than not, humans have changed their environment to suit their needs, and how that's in turn affected their society. And that's something that's wildly under-discussed about archaeology, and it's something that's incredibly necessary in today's world. So whenever some archaeologist claims that they've been discredited because other archaeologists can't handle the truth or are involved in a government cover-up, that's kind of like a flat earther yelling at NASA for the same thing. I have never once spoken to any kind of government official, certainly not about changing my narrative, and I don't know any archaeologist who has. And that doesn't go for just government officials, it goes for any kind of interest group. So why do we allow it on big media programs? Well, essentially, it's just the ratings. At the end of the day, we are professionals. Yes, we take great joy in what we do. You should take great joy in what you do. But at the end of the day, what we are doing is meticulous, scientific, evidence-based work. We are not just playing in the dirt, coming up with historical fan fiction. So when these archaeology conspiracies come out from long discredited people and they somehow get big shows, it kind of annoys us as a profession. So all that is to say is that if a person has been discredited by the vast majority of the field and probably kicked out of practice, it's not because we're engaged in a cover-up. It's not because we want to stick to the established order or the established narrative. In fact, historically, we've done quite the opposite. It's kind of archaeologists' job to upset the established order, and we've done it a lot of times before. For example, we've discovered that there is no evidence for any sort of biblical exodus. Try getting the church to like you on that one. We also determined Great Zimbabwe was an African creation, rather than done by the Arab or the Phoenician colonists, as many European scholars thought at the time. Far from denying history, archaeology has been a way to give people their history back. So many records of old cultures were destroyed by short-sighted colonials and bigots that were it not for archaeology, there wouldn't be a way to reclaim this history. And it's good that colonized people can now actually be part of reclaiming their own history because they are also being trained as archaeologists, as we discussed with myth number 6. So, while archaeology was used as a tool by the colonizers to loot the nations of the colonized, it was also used as a tool by these colonized nations to get their history back post-independence. And it's important to note this because the fact that the locals built these grand monuments and great works of art sounds obvious, because it is obvious. It's the right answer. But in the 19th and early 20th centuries, the prevailing mode of thought was that the Native Americans and the Africans, especially, were little better than animals. They didn't have the mental capacity to create great works of art or grand civilizations. So, to explain these monuments, Europeans came up with some truly outlandish migration theories, usually involving Phoenicians, Arab merchants, or people from the Indian subcontinent. So, when archaeologists came out and refuted this, it was a big deal. It was on par with Darwin's evolution or Galileo's heliocentrism. And there was a lot of very high level pushback to what had been a very white supremacist narrative up until that point. But the difference between what we did then and what we do now and what these conspiracy theorists do is that we provided proper contextualized evidence that was very difficult to refute. We had peer-reviewed research. Conspiracy theorists only provide the evidence that they want to provide. At the end of the day, conspiracy theorists are peddling this same 19th century narrative all over again, just without the racial connotation. They're saying, how can people in the past have done these things? People in the past were stupid, they were incapable, they were little better than animals. But that simply isn't true. The difference between how conscious and rational and reasonable you are and how conscious and rational and reasonable ancient people were is our levels of education and our levels of technology. You are better educated, you have access to better technology, but that's about it. Ancient people understood math, they understood engineering, they understood what worked and what didn't, they knew trial and error, they were observing, they were thinking, they were conscious. So anytime somebody asks me, how did ancients do this? I just say, it's amazing what you can do when there's no TV and internet to waste your time.
Right, so I do have one final note on this. Now, there's always this question of how did so many ancient people build so many pyramids all independently of each other? Well, the answer really is as simple as standing, and you can prove this for yourself right now. I want you to stand up and do this. And now, I want you to stand like this and tell me which position you feel more stable in. It's this one, isn't it? Because you're making a pyramid with your legs. It didn't take much for ancient people to think, hey, I wonder if this works for my buildings as well.
Now, there's also the basic principle of mathematics that building something smaller on top of something bigger is always going to be more stable than doing it any other way. But I think that got my point across pretty well. And honestly, that's how these conspiracy theorists proliferate so much. They ask you all the questions and then provide you with one possible, often incorrect explanation, and then provide you with nothing else. They act like these questions are complicated when the fact is there's almost always evidence to debunk them with just a little bit of thought. And unfortunately, it's getting easier and easier to spread bad archaeology around the world. So, with that in mind, what is good archaeology? Okay, so there's a couple of different ways we could go at this. I could sit here and talk your ear off for a couple of hours on theory versus practice, the opinions on it, processualism and post-processualism, but we are getting too technical. We really are. So for YouTube's purposes, I'll break it down into two existing ways. The first way is my way. It's the good archaeology way. It's not just my way, it's the way professors do it. It's the way that most of the people I've worked with have done it. And it's to follow the evidence. And we just had a discussion on this a couple of minutes ago as to how this isn't always the easiest thing to do, because you have to go in there with no preconceived notion. You know what previous excavations have done and found, but you have no cultural or political narrative in mind, and you don't let any of these other narratives affect it. You just let the evidence tell you what the evidence tells you, and you build your narrative from that. And yeah, it's not always the easiest thing to do, because humans are weird. They're going to get creative. They're going to get weirdly sexual a lot of cases, and there's going to be debates and discussions, but at the end of the day, if you're all coming at this from this blank slate of what is the evidence saying, why is the evidence saying what you believe it's saying, at least we're on the right track. The second type of archaeologist, you've probably already figured it out, it's follow the conclusion. They will have a conclusion already formed in their mind. Any evidence that exists on the site is already going into this conclusion, and because humans are weird and can be interpreted in a million different ways, they're going to interpret it their way. And any evidence that might undermine their narrative, any context that might undermine their narrative, that's going to get delegitimized. They're going to pretend it doesn't exist. It's going to get attacked if it's pointed out. And Ancient Aliens and Ancient Apocalypse and all these other bad history documentaries, which have somehow gotten more funding for a single episode than every single archaeology site I've been on has gotten through its entire existence, and some of them have existed for decades. They are prime examples of follow the conclusion types. And can you imagine literally any other job doing things this way? I mean...
Hi, Doc. Well, it's my first time in therapy and some friends sent me here. Oh, yes, I see. Excellent. I like it when crazy people come to seek help. Crazy? I'm just here because my mom died. I'm trying to talk through the grief. Excuse me, but who's the professional here? Clearly you're the one living in a deluded fantasy world. Deluded fantasy world? But all the other therapists I spoke to said I just needed to talk through my grief. I just couldn't afford their fees. You were the most accessible. Doesn't really surprise me. Therapists feed these lies to their patients. It makes my job so much harder. Really? Well, that doesn't sound right. Oh, it's not supposed to sound right. It's because big media and corporate interests have their hands in the whole therapy industry. Are you even accredited? Well, not officially, but that's just because the licensing board is corrupt and I refuse to bribe them. All the other therapists just stay silent and go along with it because it's more convenient for their careers. Okay, so how do you know I'm crazy? Well, once I examine you, I'll be able to tell you.
But yeah, 200 years of research, a dozen generations, and you're the only one who figured it out. And once you figured it out, nobody else in the field wanted to have anything to do with you because they were jealous? No. Just no. Anyway, you might be wondering now, why should you trust me? I mean, I say I'm qualified. What actually makes me qualified? And that's a good question to ask, especially on the internet where anybody can claim any qualification. Well, for one thing, I've shown you digs that I've been on, so I've at least done that. I've shown you professional and academic digs, so I don't think there should be a doubt that I am an archaeologist, but what makes me a good one? Because a lot of these bad archaeologists have also earned their qualifications. Well, for one thing, I'm always doing research. I know how to do research. These books behind me are very much not for show, and they're very much not the only source of information I'm getting. Now, I might get a name or a date or some other small detail wrong here or there, but honestly, most of the stuff I'm going to tell you is going to be stuff I'm pretty sure is right, and it's going to be stuff that I'm not going to put in if it's not. Alright, so I like to think I'm a good archaeologist, but most archaeologists do. At the end of the day, you'll just have to tell me if you think I'm any good. All I can do is ask you to give me a bit of trust. Maybe I've earned a bit of trust today. And you can be the judge as we go along. Next video, I really will be doing the travels with part. I promise. It's Tunisia. You're not going to want to miss it. And I'll be doing some real archaeology analysis and showing you around the country. And hopefully you'll join me on that. Anyway, I'm the archaeologist, and next time, we'll do the travels. Hey guys, thanks for making it all the way to the end of my video. If you want to see more of my stuff, please remember to like and subscribe. You can donate to my Patreon too. Otherwise, you can see more content at my Instagram and Inkit pages. Why can't I get a date? Is it my hat, my hair, the 6-hour lectures on stratigraphy? Nah, definitely the hat.